Solo Leveling by Gong. Chapter 49, Blank Check. The Hunter Command Center of America dispatched agents stationed in Asia to assess the situation in Japan. A helicopter left the safe zone and entered Tokyo's airspace. The senior agent, who had volunteered to risk his life, looked down and sucked his teeth. "This is ghastly!" Tokyo was worse off than he thought. The dungeon break had left the city in ruins. Buildings had lost their shape, cars were crumbled like paper, streetlights were bent in half, and there was fire, smoke, and ash where structures once stood. Ghastly was an appropriate word to describe it. The agent furrowed his brow. He now knew what hell looked like. However, he hadn't come here to mourn the decimated city. He had a job to do. He inspected the carnage as he took footage from their bird's-eye view. He turned to the Japanese representative sitting next to him. "Considering all this damage, it's hard to spot any bodies." His training at the Hunter Command Center had included learning about the S-rank dungeon break on Jeju Island. In all the videos and photographs, the streets of Jeju had been littered with the bodies of residents who'd failed to escape the island. It was one of the worst tragedies in human history, so the Hunter Command Center kept detailed records of the event. Yet, despite the utter devastation here, there were no corpses in sight. In fact, there wasn't even a hint of the dead to be found. The Japanese representative explained. "Of course, the giants ate everyone." It was obvious from his bloodshot eyes and unshaven face that this young man working for the Hunters Association of Japan had been through a lot lately. With a worried expression, he continued, "It's like they're trying to erase every trace of humanity from the place. They knock down buildings, eat humans, and even uproot trees planted along the sidewalks." The agent agreed with his assessment. The giants from the S-rank gate were different from other magic beasts. Typically, beasts' sole aim was to kill humans, while these giant beasts were destroying everything in sight. No matter where they looked, there wasn't a single building or house left standing in the giant's wake. "But thanks to that, we were able to buy some time." The association personnel gave a wry smile, unsure whether he should be grateful or sad that some people were able to escape with their lives because the giants were so thorough in their destruction. The warring emotions were on full display on his face. As he looked at the man next to him, the agent thought, "It's amazing he hasn't gone crazy." The capital city of this man's country had been wiped out in an instant. But the agent was able to empathize with this feeling of loss caused by magic beasts. It was only 8 years ago that the magic beast Kamish had emerged from an S-rank gate and destroyed part of the American West Coast. Additionally, Japan's neighboring country of Korea had been forced to cede its biggest island to magic beasts for 4 years, and it had only recently been reclaimed. The agent had seen footage of the fierce battle. Despite having no ties to Korea, he also couldn't help but cheer when a young Korean hunter swooped in to save the day. It wasn't because he was stationed in Asia. He considered the Jeju Island raid not as a simple fight between a small country against invading magic beasts, but a battle between humanity and their mortal enemy. And now, here in Japan, yet another epic battle raged between humankind and these predators. And this is the result. Ta-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka. The helicopter was making an incredible racket, but the situation on the ground was so bad that the agent hardly noticed. He felt angry and frustrated, but he was powerless to help. All he could do was carry out the mission he'd been given. The agent continued filming as he asked his Japanese counterpart the questions that popped into his head. But then he saw something that had him falling out of his seat in shock. "Oh! That's..." The American yelled in fright as the Japanese representative helped him back onto his seat. So you saw it? Oh, over there. There's still a giant over there. Yes, one stayed. Well, no, more like it's refusing to budge from that spot. The young Japanese man shifted his gaze outside the window. The American agent wiped the cold sweat from his brow and did the same. A huge magic beast, bigger and taller than any living thing the agent had ever set eyes on, stood imposingly in a decimated section of downtown Tokyo. So that's a giant. The agent paled as the representative gave instructions to fly closer. Hey, are you sure that's safe? He'd been told that all the giants had left Tokyo, so it was perfectly safe. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. The Japanese representative calmly explained, "It's fine. As long as we stay high enough beyond its reach, it's 100% safe. Trust me, we've determined this through multiple reconnaissance missions." Gulp. The agent swallowed hard. Did he say multiple? The young Japanese man sounded so nonchalant about it. But how many people had been sacrificed for this intel? A chill ran up the agent's spine as he thought of what might have happened to those who'd gotten too close. Nonetheless, this was helpful data, as the agent's duty was to collect information on the S-rank magic beasts and report on the situation in Japan. He opened his eyes wide and looked down at the giant. The beast looked rather familiar. That's right. It was the giant that had broken through Yuri Orlov's magic force field. While the other giants had spread out, this one, which many considered to be the boss, chose to remain. The Japanese employee spoke bitterly. Do you also believe that the giant is guarding the gate? Well, this is my third time seeing it this close, and I think something different every time. What about this time? It looks to me like... The Japanese man took his time completing his response. It's like it's waiting for someone. I see. The agent's eyes shifted back over to the giant. That was certainly a plausible conclusion. He didn't think it was much of a stretch for the Japanese employee to assess the current situation in this manner. As the two men discussed the boss-rank magic beast, the helicopter reached the limit of the safe area. Even with a helicopter buzzing overhead, the giant didn't flinch, like it didn't register the presence of the man-made contraption. It remained perfectly docile. However, according to the employee, this was its choice. The beast will attack anything within a certain proximity. Whether the target is a person or a machine, there's no escape. How many flybys had it taken to reach this conclusion, though? As the young man spoke, the agent thought about Yuri Orlov. The instant the magic beast boss broke through the barrier and snatched up Yuri, viewers had been aghast. His final moments had been broadcast live all over the world. Yuri Orlov had been described in the Hunter Command Center's report as a man who seeks fortune and fame. In the end, he never got any money from Japan, but he did gain global notoriety. Though that might not have been quite what he had in mind. As the agent recalled Yuri's dying moments, the association personnel spoke up. This is just my personal opinion, but... The man's theory about the magic beast waiting for something made sense, so the agent was interested in his perspective. Go on. The representative continued at the agent's encouragement. When I look at this beast, it doesn't feel like it's alive. Sure, it breathes and moves, but it seems more like a programmed machine. A machine. Unfortunately, the agent didn't agree with this theory. Up close, the giant was extremely imposing. This suffocating pressure wasn't something a machine could generate. The giant's eyes shifted in their direction. Yikes! Whump! The agent fell out of his seat again. The Japanese representative promptly moved to calm him and helped settle his nerves. It's just looking at us. If we keep our distance, it won't hurt us. The agent nodded. He felt as if his heart had sunk to the floor. After a beat, he raised his camera, though the shakiness of the footage was a result of more than just the speed of the helicopter. After he was finished, the agent asked, "How many giants came out of the gate?" 31. All of them except the boss headed off in different directions. "How many have you killed?" "Just 2. That leaves 28 out there destroying Japan? There aren't many hunters left to fight them. Everyone is busy running away." The representative's facial expression grew solemn. On the day of the dungeon break, the hunters who fought the giants had laid down their lives to give the residents of Tokyo enough time to evacuate. They were able to kill 2 of the giants in the process, but there was no way to stop the remaining 28. This was why the Japanese representative had agreed to accompany the American despite all the fires he was busy putting out. "WH, what are you doing?" The agent tried to stop the Japanese man as he dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the floor. Neither pride nor dignity mattered any longer. If that was the only price to pay, he was more than willing to do so. The representative pleaded, "Please help the Japanese people." The American agent paused at his handler's distraught tone. The representative switched to speaking in fluent English for emphasis. "If America doesn't help us, then Japan as a nation is doomed. Japan is a trusted ally of the United States. Please consider making this sacrifice just this once for Japan." Whether the words came from the representative's own heart or the Hunters Association of Japan, the desperation in the young man's voice was his own. The agent chewed his lower lip as he thought about it for a second before replying with some difficulty. "I'll put in a request. Thank you. Thank you so much." As his Japanese guide bowed to him several times, the American didn't have the heart to tell him not to get his hopes up. The Hunter Command Center had become extremely strict regarding their hunters' welfare after losing so many high-rank assets to Kamish. So would they take such a risk for the sake of another country? I'm pretty sure they won't. Even so, how could the agent break it to the young man lowering himself for the sake of his people that his beloved country was as good as dead? "We can only leave it to the heavens." The agent gazed upward. Unfortunately, there was only silence, just as there had been in the beginning, as there was now, and as there always would be. He continued to stare at the empty sky as he muttered to himself, "Heaven help us!" Jinwoo woke up early and took a light jog to the guild office. I knew it. He kept his eyes trained on something slightly above eye level, happy to see his progress on the screen. Ping. Total distance run, 10 kilometers. You have completed running 10 kilometers. Even though he'd eliminated the so-called architect of the system, nothing had changed. So far, the system continued to function as it had before, with the daily quests arriving as soon as he opened his eyes in the morning. He was also in peak physical condition ever since the black heart had taken root within his body. Even though he was deliberately going slowly, each step was light as air. Unfortunately, the architect's death left a ton of unanswered questions. What exactly was that file I saw? Watching the file had been one of the conditions to unlock the black heart, but everything else about it remained a mystery. He was deep in thought when a loud clamor ahead snapped him out of it. "Excuse me. Hello, Mr. Yu. I'd like to ask you some questions." Jinwoo looked up and saw reporters had gathered in front of the guild office building, and they'd caught Jinho on his morning commute. He was being inundated with questions. "Mr. Yu, were you aware of the recent incident involving the Hunters Guild? Can we get an official statement from you as the vice president of the Ajin Guild? How did Hunter Sung end up at that gate? What are Hunter Sung's thoughts on the crisis in Japan? Is he planning to help them?" Jinwoo raised an eyebrow. The reporters couldn't interview him personally, so they'd resorted to latching onto Jinho, who was an easy target. He was about to step forward and fish out Jinho, but something gave him pause. For some reason, Jinho didn't look upset. He put on a troubled expression, but Jinwo's keen eyesight caught him suppressing a smile every now and then. Heh, he's enjoying this. Dumbfounded, Jinwoo couldn't help but chuckle. There was no need to break up the party. So what should I do now? Should he stealthily drag Jinho into the office, or come back later and let Jinho have his fun? As Jinwoo considered his options, a car rolled to a stop behind him. Its window rolled down. "Are you Hunter Jinwoo-sung?" Jinwoo instinctively turned at the familiar voice. Huh? He blinked in confusion when he saw who it was. "Aw, it's you." The man got out of the car as he confirmed Jinwoo's identity. For his part, Jinwoo recognized him from his many TV appearances regarding business and economic news. "I'm Myung-han Yu from Eugene Construction. It's nice to meet you, Hunter-sung." Chairman Yu straightened his posture and nodded lightly. The greeting was neither disrespectful nor servile. Chairman Yu's introduction was disciplined and refined, the perfect example of how to greet someone. It took Jinwoo by surprise being treated like that by the head of a big company on their first encounter. Jinwoo was polite in turn. "Jinwoo-sung, nice to meet you." With the pleasantries out of the way, Myung-han got straight to the point. "Pardon the sudden visit, but may I please have a moment of your time?" If he wanted to contact me, it would have been more convenient for Myung-han to go through his son, Jinho, instead of coming out here. Jinwoo kept the thought to himself. "How can I help you?" Myung-han looked apologetic, as if he had no choice but to approach Jinwoo in this manner. "It isn't something I can discuss with you here." Jinwoo wore a comfortable tracksuit with the hood raised so no one recognized him. But Chairman Yu was starting to attract some attention. The frequent foot traffic didn't make this place exactly conducive to a serious discussion. Jinwoo understood that, but the problem was, I have no idea what Chairman Yu would want with me. He couldn't even begin to guess. If he absolutely had to come up with a reason, he would assume it was about Jinho. More people began recognizing Chairman Yu, and some took out their phones to try to get a picture of him. As he attracted more attention, Myung-han grew a bit anxious. If I miss this chance, it'll only become harder to get an audience with him. He needed to meet with Jinwoo no matter what, so he gathered the courage to press him a little harder. "I apologize, but could you come with me, Hunter-sung? I promise not to speak of anything that might offend you." Jinwoo glanced over his shoulder. He caught sight of Jinho basking in the attention from the reporters and swallowed a laugh. Jinho seemed preoccupied. Plus, since he'd recently been monopolizing high-ranked dungeons in the area with permission from the large guilds nearby, he thought it might be a good time to take a break from raids. He acquiesced. "All right then. Thank you." Myung-han bowed his head in thanks and opened the passenger side door for Jinwoo as a chauffeur might. "Please get in." Myung-han climbed in via the other passenger door and sat beside Jinwoo. The car was so big that there was plenty of room between the two grown men. Before the car started moving, Jinwoo asked, "Where are we heading?" "I don't have a specific destination in mind. If you would like to go somewhere." Jinwoo shook his head as the car took off. Myung-han made a suggestion. "I know a place where we can talk without distraction. We can go there." Jinwoo leaned back in his seat. He found it quite comfortable, as expected of a luxury car. After a smooth, quiet drive, they arrived at their destination. "Here we are, Hunter-sung." When the driver approached Myung-han's door, he shook his head. The driver then walked over to Jinwoo's side and opened the car door for him. Jinwoo got out and looked up at the high-rise building before him. "This is where we're going to talk." As Jinwoo stood there speechless, half a dozen members of Myunghan's staff swooped in around them and gave perfect 90-degree bows. "Welcome, Chairman Yu! Welcome, Chairman Yu!" Jinwoo was impressed by the simultaneous greeting of the 6 staffers. He could only imagine how many times they would have had to practice to become so synchronized. "Please follow me, Hunter-sung." Chairman Yu casually led the way inside the building. The words Yujin Construction adorned the top. Eventually, Jinwoo followed Yu inside. The chairman waited for his guest to catch up and then matched his pace. "This way." Every employee they came across politely welcomed Myunghan. Though stone-faced, he acknowledged every greeting with a nod. Jinwoo got a vibe from Chairman Yu that was very similar to President Go of the Hunters Association. The respectful gazes his employees gave him spoke to his character. Jinwoo walked in silence behind Myunghan, and he quickly caught the employee's attention. "Who is he? Wait, is that? No way." He had taken off his hood as he entered the building, so people recognized him and were floored. The best hunter in Korea and the best entrepreneur in Korea. The sight of them walking the halls of Yujin Construction together was surprising to all who saw them. Whoa! Everyone's eyes popped out of their heads. The hearts of female employees palpitated, and male employees nodded in respect. Nobody knew why he was with the chairman, but as leaders in their respective fields, the two looked good standing side by side. They were revered by everyone watching them. The 2 men got in the executive elevator awaiting them at the end of the gauntlet of gawkers. Chairman Yu's staff came to a stop, and the elevator doors closed, leaving Jinwoo and Chairman Yu alone. Jinwoo followed Chairman Yu's example and kept silent. The elevator went directly to the floor where Myunghan's office was located. Ding! Secretary Kim was waiting for them at the entrance. He quickly nodded in greeting at Jinwoo and bowed to Chairman Yu. "My apologies, sir. You have a guest waiting for you inside." "A guest?" Chairman Yu's expression hardened. "Didn't I tell you not to let anyone in while I was out?" Secretary Kim rarely made mistakes, so Chairman Yu was more surprised than upset. Seemingly at a loss, Secretary Kim blurted out, "I told him, sir, but he was quite insistent, so..." Myunghan immediately knew who his visitor was. He shook his head and gestured toward his office. "Nothing to be worried about. Please, this way." W. Mim. The door to the chairman's office opened to reveal a middle-aged man sitting on the couch perusing a newspaper to kill time. He looked up at them. "Why is it so hard to reach you, my dear elder brother? And after suddenly canceling our plans for today, too." The man with the receding hairline was Seiko, younger brother of Chairman Yu. He moved to stand, happy to see his elder brother, but Chairman Yu glared at him. "Didn't I tell you that I have important business to attend to? I'm busy, so come back later. I know your whole schedule. What's so important?" Seiko finally caught sight of Jinwoo and stopped talking. "Huh? What?" While others remembered Jinwoo from pictures in newspapers or on TV, Seiko recognized him from his daughter's social media post. "Is he the real hunter Jinwoo-sung?" Seiko held up the picture on the front page of the newspaper in his hand to compare it to Jinwoo's face. It was a bit awkward for the hunter, but strangely, he didn't feel annoyed. Maybe because his eyes resembled Jinho's? If Jinho grew bald with age, would he look just like his uncle? In Jinwoo's mind, he'd already registered Seiko as Old Jinho. Ignoring his brother's glare, Seiko stuck his hand out and smiled brightly. Why, hello, Hunter Sung. Oh. Jinwoo found himself returning the gesture. Sieko shook Jinwoo's hand firmly, as if greeting an old friend as he introduced himself. I'm sure you've already heard a ton about me, but I'm Sieko Yu of Yule Pharmaceutical. Heard a lot about him from who? Jinwoo didn't want to embarrass the man who'd so enthusiastically welcomed him. Oh yes. Lovely to meet you. Chairman Yu had been anxiously watching their exchange, and was now taken aback as Sieko pulled his shoulders back and puffed up his chest. You saw that? My daughter has great taste in men, doesn't she? Chairman Yu's daughter was a musical prodigy, which always made Sieko feel a bit inferior to this elder brother. But now Sieko could stand tall. After all, Jinwoo was the most eligible bachelor in Korea. Sieko's social circle is larger than I thought. Chairman Yu had been planning to read his brother the riot act once Jinwoo left, but his irritation melted away. Their talk might go better if Jinwoo and Sieko knew each other. Oh geez, what am I doing? Sieko finally released Jinwoo's hand. You two have something to discuss, right? I'll get out of your hair. He looked satisfied as he made to leave the chairman's office, but he stopped next to Jinwoo. By the way, Hunter Sung. Yes. Please come over anytime. My house is your house. Come over anytime. His house is my house? Ha 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 ha. And just like that, the bright middle-aged man who talked nonsense was gone like the wind. While Jinwoo wasn't offended or anything by Sieko's booming voice and sunny disposition, he did strike the hunter as a strange man. Chairman Yu carefully asked his bemused guest, So how do you know my younger brother? There was no need for Jinwoo to keep up the act now that the man himself was gone. Jinwoo calmly replied, I've never seen him before in my life. Chairman Yu's expression darkened at the response. Damn you, Sieko. Myung-han should have known better. But he had a visitor now, so the man nicknamed Poker Face erased the irritation from his face as he gestured for Jinwoo to sit. Have a seat. He positioned himself across from Jinwoo. As if on cue, Secretary Kim entered the room. Would you like some tea? I'm fine. Hunter Sung? I'm okay. Jinwoo shook his head. Chairman Yu addressed the secretary. We have an important matter to discuss, so if you could wait outside. Yes, sir. Secretary Kim exited the room and closed the door, guarding the entrance as he had been ordered to do in advance. Even the president of Korea would have been barred access, as this was a matter of grave importance. Silence surrounded Jinwoo, and you just like it had in the elevator. The weight of this silence was different, though. Chairman Yu needed to take his time, as it was a difficult subject to broach. By the time he finally opened his mouth, Jinwoo was feeling a little bored. Hunter Sung. Jinwoo had been waiting patiently. Yes. Chairman Yu removed a check from his inner pocket. It had been issued under Myung-han Yu's name by the main bank used by Eugene Construction. However, this was no regular check. It was a blank. Here. Myung-han pushed it toward Jinwoo. Jinwoo looked down at it for a beat before looking up again. Chairman Yu spoke with much difficulty. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that money can buy anything, especially with regard to an S-rank hunter. His mouth felt dry, and he was more nervous than when he'd assumed the business after his father's passing, or the first time he'd had to make a speech in front of tens of thousands of employees, or the time he'd been hounded by hundreds of reporters. This was more important than anything he'd ever dealt with in his entire life. His own life, the future of the company he had worked hard for, and a father's desire to see his children grow a little older were all hanging in the balance. I would be grateful if you considered this as a token of my appreciation. Chairman Yu had a strong look of determination in his eyes. Jin-woo guessed why Myung-han had chosen this place for their discussion. Whatever he was about to tell him was never to be made public. This isn't about joining his guild. Myung-han had chosen this place for their talk because, barring a natural disaster, he could control the entire environment. Jin-woo was very intuitive, so he cut to the chase. "What would you like to buy from me, Mr. Yu?"